Flight attendant kicks out black girl on life support. Her dad grounds the flight. A 12-year-old black girl sits in first class, quietly reading a college textbook, her life support machine humming softly beside her. She has every legal document, every medical approval, every piece of paperwork proving she belongs in that seat. Her father, a high-ranking FAA official, has planned every detail to keep her safe. Then a flight attendant approaches her with 3 words that will change aviation history forever. You need to move. What happens next will leave you speechless. In just 5 minutes, you'll witness a medical crisis unfold, federal authorities mobilized, and a commercial airliner grounded by direct government order. This isn't just about airline discrimination. This is about what happens when someone mistakes a quiet, well-dressed black girl for someone who doesn't belong and the devastating consequences that follow. This story will expose how assumptions about race, class, and disability nearly killed a child, and how one father's response sparked a revolution that changed aviation law forever. Welcome to Black Triumphant Channel. Every story we share is more than just drama. It's a reminder of strength, resilience, and justice. If you believe in celebrating black excellence and standing against injustice and prejudice, hit that like and subscribe button right now. We would like to know where you are watching from, and what time is it for you right now in the comment. Kelly Bennett, a name that should be known by every person who's ever felt invisible, because of their race, their disability, or their age. At 12 years old, Kelly was extraordinary in ways that most people never got to see. She was living with pulmonary arterial hypertension, a condition so rare and serious that most people have never heard of it. Imagine your heart having to work harder and harder every day just to pump blood through arteries that are becoming narrower and stiffer. Without proper treatment, patients can die within minutes, not hours, minutes. But here's what made Kelly's story even more heartbreaking. This was the same condition that had killed her mother, Sarah Bennett, when Kelly was only 6 years old. Sarah had been a nurse who understood her diagnosis better than most patients ever could. She knew the treatments weren't enough to save her life, but they might give her precious time with her daughter. When Sarah died on that Tuesday morning in March, she left behind a promise from her husband, Major Darius Bennett. If Kelly ever showed signs of the same condition, he would move heaven and earth to give her every chance at a normal life. Major Darius Bennett wasn't just any worried father. He was a former military pilot who had transitioned to become a senior director at the Federal Aviation Administration. This man understood aviation law, federal regulations, and government authority better than almost anyone in the country. When Kelly was diagnosed at age 7 with the same condition that killed her mother, Darius made good on his promise to Sarah. He used every connection, every regulation, every protocol to ensure Kelly could live as normal a life as possible. Kelly's medical equipment was sophisticated and essential. She carried a portable oxygen concentrator about the size of a laptop that delivered precisely calibrated oxygen to her lungs, while monitoring her heart rate, oxygen saturation, and breathing patterns. Every beep, every light, every reading was literally a matter of life and death. But here's what made Kelly truly remarkable. She refused to let her condition define her limitations. Honor roll every semester. Debate team captain who'd never lost a tournament. At 12 years old, she was already college-bound with dreams of becoming a biomedical engineer. Inspired by her daily battle with the technology keeping her alive, Kelly had mastered what doctors call invisible disability. From the outside, she looked like any other beautiful, intelligent, well-dressed black girl. She didn't use a wheelchair, didn't walk with a cane, had no visible signs screaming medical patient. She'd learned to position her equipment to look like regular electronics, wore clothing that camouflaged her medical tubing, developed breathing techniques that minimized visible symptoms. This invisibility was usually a blessing. It allowed Kelly to navigate the world without constant stares, questions, or unwanted sympathy. But on March 15th, this invisibility would nearly kill her. That day, Kelly was flying from Chicago to Denver for the most important interview of her young life, admission to the Colorado School of Engineering, her dream school. This wasn't just about early college admission. This was about joining the community of people dedicated to solving the exact medical problems she lived with every day. Major Bennett had planned this trip with military precision. Kelly had doctor's letters, FAA medical equipment approvals, airline authorizations, every document proving her right to travel with life support equipment. Her first-class seat 2A was specially selected for optimal cabin pressure and crew access. Airport security had been briefed. Gate agents had her documentation. Her boarding pass was marked to indicate essential medical equipment. Everything was perfect. Everything was legal. Everything was approved. Kelly boarded Flight 229 during pre-boarding, settled into seat 2A with practice efficiency. Her routine was always the same. Secure the oxygen concentrator, check connections, test alarms, verify backup batteries, and emergency medications were accessible. The machine hummed quietly, a sound as natural to Kelly as her heartbeat. Other passengers filed past, most not giving her a second glance. To them, she looked like any other girl with electronics. Maybe a laptop, maybe a gaming device, exactly how Kelly preferred it. She pulled out the Biomedical Engineering Handbook and began reviewing respiratory support systems. preparing to discuss the technical aspects of her own equipment. During her interview, Kelly understood her medical condition at a level most doctors never reached. She was patient and engineer, user and designer, survivor and innovator. The flight was filling with business travelers, families, college students. Nobody paid attention to the quiet black girl in first class reading a college textbook while connected to medical equipment. She was just another passenger on what was supposed to be a routine flight. But flight attendant Jessica Morrison was about to make an assumption that would nearly kill Kelly and trigger the largest federal aviation investigation in decades. Jessica had been working for the airline for 8 years. She was experienced, well-trained, and genuinely believed she was good at her job. But Jessica had something else: unconscious biases about who belonged in first class and who didn't. As Jessica walked through the cabin doing her pre-flight check, she noticed something that bothered her. A young black girl sitting in first class, connected to electronic equipment, reading what looked like a textbook. To Jessica's unconscious bias, this didn't compute. Young black passengers, in her limited experience, didn't usually fly first class alone. They certainly didn't carry expensive-looking medical equipment, and they definitely didn't read advanced textbooks. In Jessica's mind, Kelly looked out of place. Wrong demographic, wrong age, wrong equipment, something didn't add up. Here's where this story takes a turn that will make your blood boil. Instead of following protocol, which required asking about medical equipment and requesting documentation, Jessica made an assumption based purely on what she saw. A young black passenger who looked like she didn't belong in first class. "Excuse me, sweetheart," Jessica said, approaching Kelly's seat with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "I'm going to need to see your boarding pass." Kelly looked up from her book, confused. "I'm sorry, your boarding pass," Jessica repeated, her tone becoming firmer. "And I'll need to see identification proving you're supposed to be in first class. Now, here's what you need to understand." Kelly had been flying since she was diagnosed. She knew airplane protocols, understood her rights as a passenger with medical equipment, and had never been questioned about her seat assignment. "Is there a problem?" Kelly asked politely, reaching for her carry-on where her documents were stored. "The problem," Jessica said, her voice loud enough that other passengers were starting to notice, "is that I need to verify you're supposed to be here. This is first class and frankly, you don't look like our typical first-class passenger." The words hung in the air like a slap. Kelly felt her face burn with embarrassment as other passengers turned to stare. She was 12 years old, traveling alone, connected to life support equipment, and a flight attendant was essentially telling her she didn't belong because of how she looked. "I have all my documentation," Kelly said quietly, her voice starting to shake. "My father booked this seat specifically because of my medical condition." "Medical condition?" Jessica interrupted, looking at Kelly's equipment for the first time. "What exactly is all this equipment, and why wasn't I told about a medical passenger in first class?" Kelly tried to explain about her pulmonary arterial hypertension, about her oxygen concentrator, about the documentation proving everything was approved. But Jessica wasn't really listening. She was seeing a young black girl with suspicious-looking equipment who was claiming to have a medical condition that Jessica couldn't see. "I'm going to need you to move to economy," Jessica announced. "We can't have unauthorized medical equipment in first class, and I need these seats available for passengers who actually paid for first-class service." The assumption was clear. This black girl couldn't possibly afford first class, couldn't possibly have legitimate medical equipment, couldn't possibly belong in the premium cabin. Kelly's hand started shaking, not from anger, but from the beginning of respiratory distress. Stress was one of her triggers, and the humiliation of being questioned, the embarrassment of other passengers staring, the anxiety of having her medical needs dismissed was causing her condition to flare. "Please," Kelly whispered, her breathing becoming more labored. "I can't move. My equipment is calibrated for this cabin pressure. I have all the documentation." "Listen, little girl," Jessica said, her patience exhausted. "I don't know what kind of game you're playing, but this is first class. You need to gather your things and move to the back of the plane where you belong." Where you belong. The words that would haunt Jessica Morrison for the rest of her career. But Kelly's medical crisis was escalating. The stress of confrontation was causing her pulmonary arteries to constrict. Her oxygen saturation was dropping. Her heart rate was spiking. The carefully maintained balance that kept her stable was collapsing. I can't breathe properly," Kelly gasped, reaching for her emergency inhaler. "Please, I just need to stay in my assigned seat." "That's enough," Jessica snapped. "Security." And in that moment, Jessica Morrison made the decision that would nearly kill Kelly Bennett and destroy her own career. She was calling security to remove a 12-year-old black girl on life support from first class because she assumed Kelly didn't belong there. The businessman in seat 1B, David Chin, had been watching this interaction with growing horror. As an Asian American who'd faced his own share of discrimination, he recognized exactly what was happening. "Excuse me," David interrupted, "but this young lady appears to be having medical distress. Maybe we should focus on that instead of seat assignments." Jessica whirled around, irritated by the interference. Sir, this doesn't concern you. I'm handling a passenger who's trying to claim a seat she didn't pay for. Have you actually looked at her boarding pass? David asked. Have you verified her seat assignment before accusing her of fraud? That's when Jessica realized she'd been so focused on Kelly's race and age that she'd never actually looked at the boarding pass. She'd made an assumption and doubled down on it instead of following basic procedures. But it was too late. Kelly was in full medical crisis now. Her oxygen concentrator was beeping warnings. Her breathing was shallow and rapid. Her lips were starting to turn blue. Something's wrong. David called out urgently. This girl is in serious medical distress. Other passengers were turning to look now, seeing a 12-year-old connected to medical equipment, clearly struggling to breathe, while a flight attendant stood over her, demanding she move to economy class. And that's when Kelly's phone sitting in her lap started ringing. The caller ID showed exactly what would change everything. Dad, FA executive line. If you're feeling as outraged as I was when I first learned about this story, make sure you hit that subscribe button and notification bell, because what happens when Kelly's father answers that phone call is going to restore your faith in justice. We're just getting started, and trust me, you don't want to miss how the federal government responds when one of their own senior officials discovers his daughter is being discriminated against at 30,000 F. My question for you, have you ever been made to feel like you don't belong somewhere because of how you look? Share your experience in the comments. Let's start a conversation about these everyday moments of discrimination that can have life or death consequences. Kelly's phone was ringing, but she was too distressed to answer. Her oxygen saturation was dropping dangerously low, her equipment was sounding alarms, and Jessica Morrison was still demanding she move to economy class. David Chin, the businessman who'd been trying to intervene, saw Kelly struggling to reach her phone while connected to medical equipment. Can I help you with that? He asked gently. Kelly nodded weakly and David answered the phone. Hello, Kelly. Sweetheart, is everything okay? Your plane should have taken off by now, so this isn't Kelly. My name is David Chin. I'm a passenger in seat 1B. Your daughter is having some kind of medical emergency, and the flight attendant is trying to force her to move seats. There was complete silence on the other end of the line for exactly 3 seconds. Put me on speaker, came the voice suddenly sharp with authority. Now David pressed the speakerphone and the voice of Major Darius Bennett filled the first-class cabin. This is Major Darius Bennett, Senior Director of Aviation Safety Operations, Federal Aviation Administration. Who am I speaking to? Jessica Morrison's face went white. She recognized that tone, the voice of federal authority, the kind of power that could end careers with a single phone call. This is Jessica Morrison, Senior Flight Attendant on Flight 229. Ms. Morrison, I need you to explain to me why my daughter, who is traveling with federally approved medical equipment and complete documentation, is apparently being asked to move from her assigned first-class seat. Jessica's mouth opened and closed like a fish. She was beginning to realize the magnitude of her mistake, but she was too deep to back down gracefully. Sir, I was just following protocol. What protocol? Darius's voice cut through the cabin like a blade. What protocol allows you to question a passenger's seat assignment based on their appearance? What protocol allows you to ignore medical equipment that is clearly visible and properly documented? Kelly's breathing was becoming more labored. The stress of the confrontation combined with her father's voice on speakerphone was overwhelming her already compromised system. Dad, she whispered. I can't. It's hard to breathe. The change in Darius Bennett's voice was immediate and terrifying. He went from federal official to desperate father in an instant. Kelly, baby, I need you to focus on your breathing. Is your concentrator working properly? Yes, but she wants to move me. Cabin pressure, different altitude. David Chin, who had been listening to this entire exchange, stood up and faced Jessica Morrison directly. Are you insane? He said loudly enough for the entire first-class cabin to hear. This child is on life support. Her father is a federal aviation official, and you're trying to move her because you don't think she looks like she belongs in first class. Other passengers were starting to pay attention now. Phones were coming out. People were recording. The FA Flight 229 was about to trend worldwide. Sir, Jessica said, trying to regain control of the situation. I need to maintain order in the cabin. Maintain order? David exploded. You're discriminating against a child with a disability. You're endangering her life because of your racial bias. The words racial bias echoed through the cabin like a gunshot. Every passenger was watching. Now this wasn't just about seating arrangements anymore. This was about a black child being discriminated against while fighting for her life. Meanwhile, Darius Bennett was mobilizing federal resources from his office in Washington. Sarah, he called to his assistant. I need you to ground Flight 229 immediately. Medical emergency involving crew discrimination against a disabled minor. Sir. Sarah Hinn looked confused. Do it now, use my federal authority. That's my daughter on that plane and some flight attendant is trying to kill her with ignorance and racism. Within seconds, the wheels of the Federal Aviation Authority were turning. Sarah Chen made 3 phone calls that would change commercial aviation forever. Call 1, Air Traffic Control Command Center. Flight 229 at O'Hare is grounded under direct federal order. Do not allow departure. Call to O'Hare Emergency Medical. Dispatch pediatric emergency team to Gate 42. Federal official's daughter in medical crisis due to crew actions. Call 3 airline corporate headquarters. You have a discrimination incident involving a federal official's disabled daughter. Your crew is about to face federal charges. Back on the plane, Kelly's condition was deteriorating rapidly. The stress, the humiliation, the physical strain of arguing while connected to life support was pushing her into respiratory failure. Dad, she gasped into the phone. I think I need help. Hold on, baby. Help is coming, I'm coming. Just hold on. Jessica Morrison was starting to panic. She was realizing that she just discriminated against the daughter of a senior federal aviation official, endangered a child's life, and done it all while passengers recorded everything on their phones. Perhaps, she said weakly, we can work something out. Work something out. David Chin was livid. You just spent 10 minutes trying to force a child on life support to move seats, because she's black and you didn't think she belonged in first class. What exactly do you want to work out? Captain Robert Hayes, hearing the commotion from the cockpit, came back to see what was happening. What he found was a flight attendant standing over a distressed black child connected to medical equipment while passengers recorded the confrontation, and a federal official's voice boomed from a phone on speaker. What's going on here? Captain Hayes demanded. Captain David Chin said before Jessica could speak. Your flight attendant has been trying to force this young lady to give up her assigned first-class seat. She's connected to life support equipment. She has all proper documentation and her father is a senior FAA official who's currently on speakerphone. Captain Hayes looked at Kelly, clearly in medical distress, obviously connected to legitimate medical equipment, holding documentation that even he could see was official and complete. Then he looked at Jessica Morrison, who was standing there like she just realized she'd stepped on a landmine. Morrison, Captain Hayes said quietly, please return to your station immediately. But, Captain, immediately. That's when the radio crackled with a message that had never been heard in commercial aviation history. Flight 229, this is Chicago Ground Control. You are ordered to return to gate immediately under direct federal order. Do not proceed with departure. Medical emergency and federal investigation in progress. Captain Hayes looked around the cabin at Kelly struggling to breathe at the passengers, recording everything at the phone still connected to a federal official, who was clearly mobilizing resources to protect his daughter. Ladies and gentlemen, he announced, we're returning to the gate due to a medical emergency. But the announcement that came next changed everything. Flight 229. This is not a routine return to the gate. You are under direct federal investigation for crew discrimination against a disabled minor. All crew members are to remain in place for federal questioning. Jessica Morrison's career had just ended. Kelly Bennett's fight for her life was just beginning. And Major Darius Bennett was about to show the world what happens when you mess with a federal official's child. The phone was still connected when Darius said the words that would become legendary in aviation circles. Ms. Morrison, in approximately 2 hours, you're going to be questioned by federal investigators about why you nearly killed my daughter, because you didn't think she looked like she belonged in first class. I suggest you use that time to find a good lawyer. As Flight 229 returned to the gate, as federal investigators prepared to board, as social media exploded with outrage, Kelly Bennett was fighting for every breath while connected to the equipment that kept her alive. But her father wasn't just coming to comfort her. He was coming to make sure that no other child would ever face discrimination that could cost them their life.